atheist call. Alex, pronouns are he, him, in California, wants to discuss atheists' need for irrefutable evidence for God. Okay.
Hello, guys. How are you doing?
Good.
Yeah, how are you?
Cool. Well, so I've been watching the show kind of off and on. I've also spoken with many an atheist, and I've noticed a common thread. The bottom line argument that most, hold on, excuse me. Pardon me if I sound nervous, it's because I am.
Oh, it's all good. No worries.
I'll calm down as the conversation progresses. So this common thread I've noticed, most, if not all, atheists say they need to have irrefutable proof for God before they'll believe in God. And the Bible is rejected. Things like miracles are rejected. People's testimonies are rejected. And so I'm wondering what kind of evidence would be satisfactory for you, perhaps the common atheist. And then once you answer that, I want to make a claim, but I'll let you answer first.
Novel predictions or a deductive argument, I guess. But I mean, I'm kind of skeptical that I'm going to produce a deductive argument that God doesn't exist and convince the theist. And similarly, I think that they're probably not going to. One of the premises we're probably just going to say, hey, I already have a worldview that denies that premise being true. So it's not really going to convince me. So that's one way maybe. And then the other one, I stress kind of three ways, a worldview comparison, which I think we would just have to assess the data in terms of like, maybe we both agree there's fine tuning, or we both agree there's conscious agents, or that the universe began to exist, or whatever. And we assess the view there and see which one is simpler, meaning has less commitments and explains all the data. So I have a lot of different avenues that I can go. It's pretty much just like inductive, abductive, deductive kind of routes.
Yeah, and I kind of, I don't know, the way you phrased the thing, that atheists will only accept irrefutable proof.
Yeah, I don't get that.
To begin with, that, I mean, I don't know really even know what you mean by that, because I would accept anything, any kind of evidence or proof that to kind of separate for the kind of scientific method and the philosophical realm. But I would accept any which demonstrates the claim to be true. And yeah, I don't really know what you mean by irrefutable in that respect. And the thing is, again, with you saying things like, things like miracles are dismissed. Miracles are dismissed because they need evidence to support themselves. We had a call earlier on talking about miracles, and miracles can be anything from kind of mundane things, which are mathematical miracles, which are just statistical, to kind of, if you have a look at the miracle claims in the Bible, they're kind of split into different categories. And when you really, really break them down, not many of them can be classed as supernatural miracles. There are things that are highly unlikely, like Sarah having a child at 90 years old. There are things that can be reproduced by magicians, like turning water into wine or walking on water. These things can be can be reproduced using other methods. So to even make them kind of to demonstrate that the supernatural miracles is a job and a half in itself. And then you've got this other whole section of claims being made that we need to kind of really, really break apart. It's not just a case of saying, I mean, like things like personal testimony. It's not that personal testimony in and of itself is rejected as a methodology. It's that kind of given the claims, if we take the resurrection account, for example, and we're often told, oh, we've got personal testimony, we've got this, that, and the other. But actually we don't have, because if we really break down what we've got in the gospel accounts, that's more like a newspaper report of somebody else's witnessing something. Because the other, if we take some of the accounts and it says there's only Mary Magdalene there, but this is somebody reporting that. This isn't Mary Magdalene writing. And so we've got to see them for what they are. So it's not actually personal testimony we're dealing with in a lot of these cases when we're told that it is. So we really have to break all those things down and assess them on their own merits.
Okay. So I was referring to personal testimony. Somebody in person, and that person says, "Oh, God saved me from this," or "God answered my prayers this way. My grandmother was healed, therefore that's a miracle." I've heard many atheists say, "Okay, that's great, but how can that doesn't do it for me to prove that God is real."
How would you demonstrate that's the case, though? And let me take the atheist out of the argument completely for you. And let's say that we have a Christian who says, "My grandmother was healed by God, and that proves that God exists for me. That is evidence of a miracle." And then we have a Muslim who says, "My grandmother was healed, and that's evidence that my God is real." And then we have a Buddhist and says that my grandmother was healed, and that's evidence that the Dharma is real and that miracles can occur through supernatural events in Buddhism. So how would we ascertain which one of those is right? See, if we're only using personal evidence, a person speaking as the criteria of that as being true, then we've already got a massive, massive problem, because we've got three identical claims claiming exactly the same thing. So if we're going to take personal testimony itself as the yardstick, as the evidence, then in this situation, we have no evidence. We've got nothing that shows that one is more likely than the other.
And this is why predictive expectation really matters, because if you have three views that are all equal and nothing separates themselves, one can have right? If you have a hypothesis, three hypotheses that explain all the same data, but yours makes a predictive expectation that's right, you win, right? You're the one who has evidence for your claim. If it's not successful with the other ones, that's not a good explanation. And so that's why I want to harp on the novel predictions or predictive success, because in the case like Richard gave, that's going to be one of the ways to separate one of the views that's likely to be true over the other one. So we're not saying it needs to be proof, but that's what we mean by evidence. That's why we have evidence of like the Big Bang, because we predicted atomic light nuclei or a ratio of helium and hydrogen, right? And so if those things come true, or they fit the model or the hypothesis that other ones don't, like the steady state, we have reason to abandon the steady state in favor of a new model. I mean, that's really all it comes down to for me. I'm happy to move to the other side if I have the same type of criteria that I use for everything else.
Okay, I want to respond to what you just said, but first I want to say, respond to what the Richard Gilbert. I want to respond to what you said about the three hypothetical situations. I don't see those as common things. I've never heard about anybody. Well, let me ask you, how often do you hear about Buddhists praying to whomever or Hindus praying to whomever and then they're healed?
I hear about it quite a lot because I interact with Muslims and Buddhists quite regularly.
And crystal clutchers.
I've been invited to mosques for Eid meals. I've stayed at Buddhist temples. So I interact with these people as much, if not more, than Christians. So these claims are claims that I do hear. This isn't just me just making shit up. This is stuff I hear on a regular basis.
And somewhere Kelly right now is just like jumping. Like, you know how many people, how many crystal woo-woo people I've talked to, it says that their grandmother was healed by crystals, right? So this happens all the time. By the way, healing, this isn't even like a miracle event, because I can ask anybody in the audience, right? Have you had an event or have you and someone in your family or someone you know had something where they shouldn't have lived, but they lived? The doctors told them they shouldn't have lived. I think literally everybody has that experience in their family. It doesn't sound like it's a great thing. I'm glad that happened, but it doesn't sound so miraculous since fucking everybody goes through it. Like, it's happened to me in my life. My dad died 3 times. My dad has a pacemaker, right? My dad's had some health issues, and thankfully he's come back from those. But I mean, if I just say, thank God, it's science and that's it. I mean, I can make that move, but hopefully there's, someone's adding more to that there's a God or there's other entities. That's not up to me, because we agree that there's science. We agree there's a science of a medicine. We agree that there's all these things that we already agree with. You're adding more metaphysical salt and pepper than I am. I don't need to explain that. It's like the common theme is I don't need to add this stuff to explain the data.
And that's exactly why we need to take kind of statistical views of very large numbers into account when assessing these claims, because in a lot of cases, this is the case. Even with claimed biblical miracles, this is very often the case. We've got alternatives to the supernatural that we know happen.
Okay, so I think the healing argument is maybe a little bit tired. It's not like what I would want to focus on as far as miracles, because I agree it's pretty easy to say, oh, that was medicine, that was this, that, and the other. So what about things that are much more nuanced? Like, let me just briefly tell you a miracle that I experienced, because there's no other way it can be possible. So I was driving a long distance one day. I had to get to a place that was 2 hours away. I misjudged how far the gas station was before leaving town, and I had just about an empty gas tank. On my gauge, it shows me, like in numbers, how many miles I have left, and it counts down all the way to 0. I misjudged the gas station distance, and I thought I'll get the next one. I didn't realize that it was 30 miles away, and I had less than 20 miles left on my gauge. So I prayed. I had faith in God. I trusted that he was going to get me there. Make the impossible happen. And I watched my gauge go down to 0. And for the next 25 miles, I drove on an empty tank until I got to the gas station, filled it up. And I think that is supernatural. It's an impossibility in reality, or in like scientific terms. How does something like that?
We aren't there, Alex. So we don't know. We can't investigate that, right? But the one thing to say is that, I mean, how much of that could be due to your ignorance of how much of an actual tank? Because like I was driving on E. I just bought a new car for my brother, and I was on E, and I was like, oh crap! I had to like sit there and go, I don't know how much I have until my tank runs out. And I get to the gas station, I put the gas in, I go, I need to know for the future, like how much does this car? It was like 100. It said it would go like 60 to 100 miles or something on E for me, which I was not expecting at all. It was like, I think it was like 60 miles.
And something
so I just don't know how much of this is just due to potential ignorance of how your car operates, right? I don't see anything significant on why this would be God.
Yeah, and something you said, Alex, really kind of struck me there, because you said there is no other explanation. It has to be a miracle. And yet we know that car instruments can fail. We know that car instruments don't always register what they appear to be registering. These are things that we know happen.
Especially if it's like the little bobber thing for the gas, right? Because that's outdated. And mine tells me it's empty. I'll get in the car and I'm like, oh crap, I got gas. Then I'm like, no, I'm empty. You lied.
I mean, my car probably works completely different to yours do anyway, because it's probably be about 1/10 of the size of your huge American gas guzzling thing. So, yeah.
I got a Camry, so it's not too big.
But yeah, in all seriousness, Alex, why would you determine that there is no other possible explanation other than a miracle for that event?
I think it makes sense to say, I saw one thing, I prayed about it, and then I saw the results. And that didn't
particularly answer the question I've just asked, though.
Right.
The question I asked was, how would you kind of assess that is the only possible explanation?
Well, the only possible explanation, because what would be the alternative? If my instruments fail me and I have to trust
your ignorance of the situation, or the fact that
we've literally just presented at least 3 alternative scenarios to you that it could have been.
I delivered pizzas for like 7 years. You know how many times I drove on E? It was like barely had money to get there. I'm begging that these people give me a tip so I can start stacking up some money. and I end up getting there back 4 different deliveries. I just don't see, like, I would, even if I was said thank God or praise God or praise naturalism, hopefully naturalism is true. Like, I just don't see the connection.
I now know where J. Mike's pizza obsession comes from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Send your pizzas to, no, I'm just kidding. No, but Alex, I mean, do you see what he's saying though? Like, in terms, because I want to get back to Richard's point before I guess we move on, is that he's wanting to know if it's possible, right? That could be explained and it not be a miracle. And I feel like we should say yes to that. I feel like you should say, I mean, I'm not going to tell you what you need to say, but I mean, is it out of the cards that the instruments were displaying the wrong, gauge, and that you thought you had more gas, or you didn't know that it could actually had a tank reservoir that you could actually get more gas out of, right? I don't really, is that possible? Because I'm not seeing why that wouldn't be. It seems like things people do every day. They're like, oh, I didn't know I had that much gas. I was wrong. Not like, oh, therefore God exists.
Hang on. Would you mind repeating that last part again?
Well, yeah. Is it possible for? I guess Richard's question is it possible that it could be anything else?
Well, of course it's possible. I'm not discounting that there are other things that can be at play.
But you literally did. You literally stated that it was impossible that it could be anything other than a miracle.
Okay, so let me return that to you. Why does it always have to be something other than a miracle? So why is miracle not also in the cards?
Because we have no demonstration that a supernatural miracle can occur. And this is the problem. Yeah, we've got alternatives to a miracle. Your own miracle experience, we've just presented alternatives to you, which after saying it was impossible that it could be anything else, you acknowledged, in fact, could be something else.
Okay, so maybe my personal examples are easily picked apart, but I've heard of other testimonies from people who've experienced things that are
sure, and
far more.
You've heard other people from other religions to have testimonies too, right?
Yeah, that's a different topic. I feel like there's.
But it's not though. It's not though because you're look. The reason why you prayed instead of didn't beg a law to not like end up getting in an accident and going to Jahannam or something, right? The reason why you didn't do that or pray to Allah or pray to Vishnu is because you already have these beliefs. And you're talking about people who get into similar situations like you that pray to their deity, and then the outcome is achieved. And so by your lights, they have just as good evidence to conclude that Allah exists. But that wouldn't be good for you, because then we've contradicted the fact that we think Yahweh exists based off the same reasoning. And so now what we're doing is we're pointing out that this isn't good enough. They both can get us to different conclusions. We need to add more. My suggestion was novel predictions. But miracle events, it's not my problem that they're divorced from that. Like, if someone wants to create something that's hard to falsify or verify, like, that's not my problem. Like, have a better analysis on it and how we can actually be reasonable in assuming justification there. But it's not really my problem that, something is defined in such a way that's hard to verify.
Do you think, Alex, that God wants us to believe that he exists?
Of course.
So why doesn't he make it easier for us to do that instead of giving us these really, really vague kind of scenarios which could possibly, and I think I'm being generous by saying that, be a supernatural miracle, and have mundane alternative explanations? I mean, biblically speaking, he could directly place knowledge of his existence into our hearts without overriding our free will. So there's literally nothing from a theological point of view. If God wants us to believe in him, just making us all believe in him, and then we would have the choice of whether we chose to follow him or not, which is the important part of theology. Not that we believe in him. And there's plenty of characters in the Bible that believed in God but didn't choose to follow him. So it seems like he's going to, if he wants us to believe in him, it seems like he's going a really, really long way round to kind of get that action done. It seems that either he's incapable of doing it, or or doesn't want to do it. Yeah, and that's if he exists to begin with.
Which is strange because he wants to help you with gas, but he doesn't want to help, some people's parents who are praying for their child with leukemia to survive. But it's very convenient that it also, to me, it seems it's got to speak to the character of what you think is loving and true. This might be a separate point, that if he's really invested in proving to you just by getting you somewhere because of gas, but he'll let an infant die. This just sounds like the hallmark of chance and that shitty things happen. And that's what you expect in a naturalistic type of world. The universe doesn't have feelings about you. It doesn't care. It doesn't even possess the ability to. And so you're going to get these types of outcomes. But yeah, I don't know. It seems strange because I know if I was happy that I got somewhere and I thought that was evidence of God, and then my friend called me up and said, I prayed all day and Johnny didn't make it. All right. We have to do a funeral and we have all this. I'd feel very weird about how successful that prediction was for me. Right.
Well, the answer to that is because the answer isn't always yes. So just because you pray for something doesn't mean you're going to get that thing. And Christians are aware of that. I have many prayers that have been answered no or wait. So it doesn't mean that it's 100%.
Does an all-loving being tier gas mileage over baby killing? Because if that's the case and you want to have a constitutive notion of goodness there, we're just way off the fucking map. We probably will never have any clear understanding of each other's opinion, because that's insane to me. But I mean, we're running up on time, so I want to give you a sec, time to kind of close it out, Richard. But we do I want to make sure we because we're way over time. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. Next, I want to call back when we have more time, so we can actually have a lengthy.
That'd be awesome.
But
yeah.
No, Alex, that'd be great. But I want you to, feel free to say your piece and everything you want to say, because I don't want to just cut you off and then end the show.
Right. So, just lost my train of thought. So you were saying,
sorry, my bad.
Not allow very evil things, and then allow seemingly nonsensical things like gas. But the reality of the world is that we live in a fallen world. It's sinful. People will commit crimes against God and other people. And God doesn't just jump in and stop everything that's wrong. There's an entire process to it, which unfolds over long periods of time. And I think you guys already know that. When you look at the Bible, you see how there are, God is patient, plays the long game, because we...
Yeah, he watches somebody get raped and then he punishes them later. We get that. That's why we think it's despicable and not indicative of an all-loving being. Because if a loving being had at least one character, it would at least be stopping one instance. But it doesn't even stop one. It lets all of them go. I think it's all punish you later, right? It's not a really good thing from my eyes. But two, God already knew that the fall was going to happen. Right, he's omniscient. He knows it's going to occur. It's not that he's going to get tripped up by two naked people right on his way to creating the universe. That's not what's going to happen to an omnipotent being who knows it's going to happen ahead of time. He's not going to be like, oh, those meddling kids again, and they're eating of the fruit. He knows that, and he goes ahead with it anyway. So presumably God has reasons to allow evil, and then that doesn't even seem clear to me that there's even evil in your worldview. It seems that all things considered, that things should occur, that there should be evil. That's why God went ahead with it, rather than creating a world where we freely do good like he does, right? So, I mean, we can touch on this more. If you want to go on the problem of evil, it's one of my favorite things to talk about. But in terms of the evidence and the stuff with the miracles and all that stuff, I'm not really seeing how you've provided evidence that goes against the possibilities that Richard has kind of teased out to show that those are possibilities. It seems that both of those are on an epistemic par, right? They're equivalent with each other. I would say the naturalist view probably works better in the sense that at least we know that there's, the universe and natural things, but it's a separate, yeah.
Right. I didn't think to say that, but stuff like, I mean, the natural world, the universe, and those things, and the fact that the Bible exists, many will say that's evidence enough. And there are those who say that's not evidence. And that's the point. I wanted to focus more on that, and we rabbit trailed off onto these other topics. But
yeah, apologies. I mean, that might have been my fault. I apologize if that's the case. But yeah, Alex, I mean, if you want to call in, like, I don't know when I'm on next or whatever. I'd suggest to call any of the hosts, but we'd love to have you on for that. But I'd love to continue this conversation with you because maybe we can get not rabbit trail and get to your concern better next time. So apologies if we didn't address that.
Yeah, I think we can find some common ground. Just got to stay more on topic.
Sure. Yeah, that's totally understandable. All right. Well, thank you, Alex. We appreciate the call, and hopefully we'll hear from you in the future.